The lantern's glow revealed her first, a thin figure huddled in the corner of his barn, rainwater pooling beneath her worn boots. Swifthawk paused, weathered hand gripping his rifle. The girl's eyes darted up like a cornered animal's, hollow from hunger and bright with fear. Her trembling fingers clutched an empty cloth sack. Outside, thunder rolled across the Arizona territory, but inside, only silence hung between them. He'd lost everything to white settlers, his family, his tribe's land. Now one of their daughters cowered before him, stealing shelter from the storm. Years of bitterness should have hardened his heart. Could an Apache warrior who'd sworn never to trust again find room for compassion? Would she become his redemption or his final regret? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Swifthawk lowered his rifle, but kept his stance firm, as the girl pressed herself further into the corner. Her eyes, though fearful, held a stubborn light. The rain hammered against the barn roof, creating a steady drumbeat above them. "I'll go," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Just let me wait until the storm passes." Swifthawk studied her face, pale, dirt-streaked with high cheekbones that spoke of pride despite her circumstances. Her clothes were soaked through, a simple dress and jacket that had seen better days. Beside her lay a small leather pouch, cracked and worn with age, but clearly treasured. He gestured toward it. "What's that?" Her hand moved protectively over the pouch. "Nothing stolen, if that's what you're asking." Lightning flashed, illuminating the barn in harsh white light. In that instant, Swifthawk saw beyond her defiance to the exhaustion beneath. He'd seen that look before, in his own reflection after the soldiers came. "You're on Apache land," he said, his English deliberate and accented. "I know." She swallowed hard. "They said this place was abandoned. They were wrong." Thunder crashed and she flinched. Swifthawk noticed how her shoulders trembled, not just from fear, but from cold and hunger. The empty sack beside her told its own story. "When did you last eat?" he asked. The question seemed to surprise her. She blinked, suspicious. "Yesterday. Maybe the day before." Swifthawk nodded once, decision made. He stepped back toward the barn door. "Come." "Where?" Her voice sharpened with renewed fear. "Inside. Where it's dry." When she didn't move, he added, "Or stay here." "Your choice." He turned and walked out into the rain, not looking back. The drumming of the downpour filled his ears as he crossed the muddy yard to his cabin. Behind him came the hesitant splash of footsteps. The fire in his small stone hearth had burned low. Swifthawk added wood, watching as the flames licked upward. The girl stood in the doorway, rain dripping from her clothes onto the packed earth floor. "Sit," he said, pointing to a wooden chair near the fire. She remained standing, clutching her leather pouch. "Why are you helping me?" It was a good question, one he'd been asking himself since the moment he lowered his rifle. By all rights, he should despise her, this girl from the people who had taken everything from him. Instead of answering, Swifthawk moved to a shelf and took down a clay bowl. He ladled stew from the pot hanging near the fire, then set the bowl on the table. "Eat," he said. Her gaze darted between his face and the food. "Hunger won." She crossed to the table and sat, still keeping the leather pouch close. Swifthawk watched as she ate, slowly at first, then with increasing urgency. He filled a cup with water and placed it beside her. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated, spoon halfway to her mouth. Rose Miller." "I'm Swifthawk," she nodded slightly, returning to her meal. When she finished, she sat back, some color returning to her face. "Thank you," she said, the words barely audible. Swifthawk's attention turned to the leather pouch. Rose noticed his gaze and hesitated before loosening its drawstring. From inside, she withdrew a carved wooden whistle, simple but beautifully crafted. "My father made it," she said, offering no further explanation. Swifthawk understood all the same. A keepsake, a memory, perhaps all she had left. He moved to the corner of the cabin and unrolled a buffalo hide. "You sleep here tonight. Tomorrow you go." Rose clutched the whistle tighter. "Where would I go?" "Not my concern." Her eyes flashed. "The nearest town's 20 miles. The ranch I left." She shook her head. "I can't go back there." Swifthawk studied her. There was trouble behind her, that much was clear. Trouble he didn't need. Yet something in her determination reminded him of his sister before the soldiers came. "One night," he said firmly. "Then we decide." Outside, the storm continued its assault, but inside, an uneasy truce had formed. Swifthawk settled into his chair, carving knife in hand, while Rose curled onto the buffalo hide, the wooden whistle still clutched in her fingers. Neither spoke again that night, but both remained awake long after the fire had died down to embers, listening to the rain and wondering what the morning would bring. Dawn broke with tentative fingers of light through the cabin's single window. Rose awoke with a start, momentarily confused by the unfamiliar surroundings. The events of the previous night rushed back as she spotted Swifthawk seated at the table, hands working methodically with a bundle of leather strips. A copper medallion hung from a leather cord around his neck, catching the morning light. The design was intricate, concentric circles with symbols Rose didn't recognize, etched into the metal. "You slept," Swifthawk said without looking up from his work. Rose sat up, smoothing her wrinkled dress. "Yes," her stomach growled loudly, bringing a flush of embarrassment to her cheeks. Swifthawk gestured toward a pot near the hearth. "There's food." Rose served herself cautiously, aware of his eyes following her movements. The stew was different from last night, thicker with unfamiliar herbs. "What is this?" she asked, tasting it hesitantly. "Rabbit? Sage? Good medicine?" His answers came clipped, efficient. Rose ate in silence, stealing glances at him. In daylight, she could better see the weathered lines of his face, the silver threading through his black hair, tied back with a leather strip. Not an old man, but one who had seen much. "Where did you learn English?" she finally asked. A shadow crossed his features. "Mission school. Many winters ago. You speak it well." He made a non-committal sound, returning to his leather work. Rose finished eating and placed her bowl near a washing basin. She noticed the cabin now, small but orderly. Bundles of dried herbs hung from the rafters. A rifle stood in one corner, a bow and quiver in another. Everything had its place. "I should go," she said, though the thought sent a chill through her. Swifthawk looked up then, his dark eyes assessing. "You have somewhere to go?" Rose's fingers twisted in her skirt. "I'll find something. A town, maybe. Nearest town is Diamond Creek, white settlement." His tone made clear what he thought of that. 20 miles west. "I can make it." Even to her own ears, the words lacked conviction. Swifthawk touched the copper medallion at his throat, a gesture that seemed unconscious. "Why did you run?" The question caught her off guard. Rose stared at the earthen floor, memories of the ranch surging unwanted. Mr. Peterson's hands. The locked door. Her desperate escape through the window. "The man I worked for. He wanted things I wouldn't give." Her voice grew quieter. "When I refused, he said he'd take them anyway." Understanding darkened Swifthawk's expression. He nodded once, requiring no further explanation. "He'll be looking for you." "Probably." Rose squared her shoulders. "But I won't go back." Swifthawk rose, moving to the doorway. He looked out at his small homestead. The barn, a corral with 2 horses, a garden plot, all surrounded by the vast landscape of brush and distant mountains. "There is work here," he said finally. "Wood to chop. Garden needs tending." Rose joined him at the door, uncertain. "You're offering me work?" "Until you're stronger. Then you decide." He turned to face her. "No town will hire Apache girl. No ranch will take woman alone without questions." "I'm not Apache," Rose said, confused. Swifthawk's mouth curved slightly. "They see you here, living with Apache. Makes no difference what you are, then." The reality of her situation sank in. Even if she reached town safely, a young woman without family or references would find few respectable options. "Why would you help me?" she asked. Swifthawk's fingers touched the copper medallion again. "My sister wore this before soldiers came." His eyes grew distant. "She was brave, stubborn." Rose understood this was as close to an explanation as she would get. "I can work," she said. "I'm stronger than I look." Swifthawk nodded, decision made. "You stay in barn. Better if anyone comes." He handed her a wooden bucket. "Get water from stream. Then I show you garden." As Rose took the bucket, their fingers brushed briefly. For a moment, neither moved. Then Swifthawk stepped back, returning to his work at the table. Outside, the morning air carried the scent of sage and distant rain. Rose paused at the stream, catching her reflection in the clear water. Beneath the dirt and fatigue, determination shone in her eyes. She may have lost everything, but somehow, in this strange place with this silent man, she'd found a moment to breathe. The copper medallion around Swifthawk's neck gleamed in her memory, a sister lost, a connection to the past. Perhaps they were both survivors in their own way. 3 days passed in a rhythm of work and cautious coexistence. Rose slept in the barn on a pallet Swifthawk had prepared, taking her meals with him in the cabin. Each day she grew steadier on her feet, the hollow look in her eyes gradually filling with purpose. On the 4th morning, Swifthawk found her already in the garden, kneeling between rows of corn and beans. She worked with surprising skill, her hands moving confidently among the plants. "You know growing," he observed. Rose looked up, shielding her eyes against the morning sun. "My mother taught me. We had a small plot behind our house before." She trailed off, returning to her work. Swifthawk squatted beside her, examining a wilting plant. From his pocket, he withdrew a small clay jar, its surface etched with geometric patterns and sealed with beeswax. "What's that?" Rose asked, eyeing the jar. "Medicine for plants." He removed the seal and dipped his fingers into a thick paste. The pungent scent of herbs filled the air as he carefully applied it to the soil around the struggling plant. Rose leaned closer, curious. "May I?" After a moment's hesitation, Swifthawk offered her the jar. Rose dipped her finger in, examining the mixture. "Smells like sage, but there's something else." Yucca root, juniper, old knowledge. Pride touched his voice. "My grandmother was plant healer for our people." Rose carefully returned the jar. "Will it save the plant?" "Perhaps. Some things too far gone." His eyes met hers briefly. "Some things survive against all odds." The moment stretched between them, broken by the distant sound of hoofbeats. Swifthawk was on his feet instantly, alert as a deer scenting danger. "Inside," he ordered. "Now!" Rose hurried to the barn, while Swifthawk moved casually toward the cabin, the clay jar disappearing into his pocket. By the time the riders appeared, he was sitting on his porch, seemingly absorbed in mending a bridle. From the barn's shadows, Rose watched 2 white men approach. Their clothes marked them as ranchers, not soldiers, but the rifles across their saddles were warning enough. "Ho there, Indian," the larger man called out. "We're looking for a girl. Run away from Peterson's place. Seen anyone pass through?" Swifthawk looked up slowly, his face revealing nothing. "No girl here." The second man spat tobacco juice into the dust. "Mind if we look around? Peterson's offering $20 to anyone who finds her." "This is Apache land," Swifthawk said, his voice level but firm. "No white man's business here." The first rider shifted uncomfortably. "Now listen. I listen. I tell truth. No girl here?" Swifthawk stood, his movement unhurried but carrying a quiet authority. "Long ride back to Peterson's. Water your horses at stream if needed. Then go." The men exchanged glances, weighing the situation. Finally, the larger man nodded. "If you see anything, Peterson will pay good money." "I remember," Swifthawk said. Rose held her breath until the riders disappeared down the trail. When Swifthawk entered the barn, she emerged from her hiding place, trembling slightly. "They'll come back," she said. Swifthawk nodded. "Probably. I've put you in danger. I should leave." "And go where?" His question held no accusation, only practicality. Rose had no answer. Swifthawk watched her for a long moment, then removed the clay jar from his pocket. "My grandmother made this," he said, turning it in his hands. "When soldiers came, I took only this. All that remains of her wisdom." Rose understood what he was telling her. Like the jar, she had survived when much was lost. And like the knowledge it contained, some things were worth protecting. "Teach me," she said suddenly. Swifthawk raised an eyebrow. "Teach what?" "Everything." Rose gestured toward the jar. "How to make medicine. How to track like you do. How to—" She hesitated. "How to belong in this place. A complexity of emotions crossed Swift-Hawk's face. Surprise, wariness, and something else Rose couldn't name. "Why?" he asked. "Because I can't go back," she said simply. "And I need to know how to go forward." Swift-Hawk studied her, seeing perhaps for the first time not just a white girl in trouble, but a spirit unwilling to be broken. Finally he nodded. "We begin tomorrow," he said. "Today, finish the garden." As he turned to leave, Rose called after him. "Swift-Hawk?" "Thank you." He paused at the barn door. "Don't thank yet." "Learning Apache ways is not easy path. Neither was running away," she replied. "But here I am." A ghost of a smile touched his lips before he disappeared into the sunlight, leaving Rose with the impression that she had just committed to something far more significant than gardening lessons. A fortnight passed. Rose's days fell into a pattern, rising before dawn, tending the garden, learning Swift-Hawk's methods for preserving food, and in the afternoons, following him into the surrounding wilderness for lessons in tracking and foraging. Today, Swift-Hawk led her farther than before, to a narrow canyon where cottonwoods grew along a seasonal stream. He moved with the quiet efficiency that still amazed her, seeming to disturb nothing as he passed. "Look," he said, pointing to a small print in the mud. "What made this?" Rose knelt, studying the impression. "Deer?" "No, too small. Pronghorn fawn. Good." He nodded approvingly. "Now which direction?" She hesitated, noting the slight displacement of soil. "That way." "Toward the water." A smile flickered across Swift-Hawk's face, a rare sight that Rose had learned to treasure. In these past weeks, she'd catalogued his expressions like precious finds, the slight crinkle around his eyes when amused, the softening of his mouth when pleased with her progress. "You learn fast," he said. Moving upstream, they rounded a bend in the canyon, and Swift-Hawk stopped so abruptly that Rose nearly collided with him. He reached back, his hand finding her arm in a warning gesture. Ahead, a crude campsite lay abandoned. Fire circle still warm, empty tins scattered about. Swift-Hawk approached cautiously, examining the ground. "Hunters," he said, his voice tight. "4 men. Left this morning." Rose followed, noticing a fallen object near the fire ring. She bent to retrieve it. A playing card, the Jack of Spades, its corner stained with tobacco juice. The sight of it sent a chill through her. She'd seen this deck before, marked with the same stain. "Peterson's men," she whispered, holding out the card. "This belongs to Jenkins, his foreman." Swift-Hawk took the card, turning it over in his fingers. His expression darkened. "They search closer now," he said. Rose fought the panic rising in her throat. "Why won't they give up?" "I'm just one ranch hand." Swift-Hawk's gaze was knowing. "Men like Peterson don't accept losing what they believe is theirs." The card seemed to burn between them, a harbinger of danger that had tracked them to this quiet canyon. Swift-Hawk pocketed it and surveyed the campsite once more. "We go." Different way back. They traveled in silence, Swift-Hawk leading them through a maze of arroyos and rock formations that offered concealment. The sun had begun its descent when they reached a small mesa overlooking the cabin. Swift-Hawk paused, scanning the terrain below. "Wait here." "What are you doing?" Rose asked, alarmed, making sure they're not waiting. He moved down the slope with practiced stealth. Rose watched anxiously as he circled the property, checking for signs of intrusion. When he finally signaled for her to join him, relief washed over her. Inside the cabin, Swift-Hawk placed the playing card on the table between them. In the fading light, the Jack's face seemed to leer. "I should leave," Rose said, not for the first time. "And go where?" Swift-Hawk countered, as he always did. "Somewhere they won't look. Somewhere you won't be in danger for harboring me." Swift-Hawk was silent for a long moment. Then he crossed to a trunk in the corner, one Rose had never seen, opened. From it, he withdrew a bundle wrapped in soft deerskin. "My wife made this," he said, his voice low as he unwrapped the bundle. Rose's breath caught. A dress of buckskin emerged, elaborately beaded with designs of birds and stars. The craftsmanship was exquisite, each bead meticulously placed. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "She was Mescalero. Different tribes, same enemies." His fingers traced the beadwork reverently. "Soldiers came during winter." Many years ago now. Understanding dawned slowly. You were married, Swifthawk nodded. And a father, the revelation hung in the air between them. In all their time together, he had never spoken of a wife or child. What happened? Rose asked softly. What always happens when white men decide they want Indian land? His voice held no self-pity, only a deep, weathered sadness. I was away hunting, came back to ashes. Rose reached across the table, her fingers stopping just short of his. I'm sorry. Swifthawk carefully rewrapped the dress. Peterson's men will not give up. But neither did I. He looked at her then, his gaze direct and uncompromising. You asked to learn Apache ways. First lesson, we survive, always. As darkness fell, the playing card remained on the table between them, a reminder of the danger closing in. But beside it now lay another truth. Swifthawk had survived losses greater than Rose could imagine. And somehow, in sharing that pain, he had offered her something precious, hope. Hold steady, Swifthawk instructed, adjusting Rose's grip on the bow. Breathe with it. Become the arrow. Dawn light filtered through the pines as Rose drew back the bowstring, muscles trembling with effort. The target, a small circle of rawhide hung from a distant tree, seemed impossibly far away. I'll never hit it, she muttered, not with that thinking. Swifthawk stood behind her, his presence solid and reassuring. Clear your mind. See only the path. Rose exhaled slowly, trying to focus. The boo had become her daily companion over the past week, a slender piece of juniper wood, lovingly crafted and polished smooth by generations of hands. Swifthawk had explained it was a training bow, smaller than his hunting weapon, but perfect for learning. She released the arrow. It arced through the morning air, missing the target, but embedding itself in the tree trunk, closer than her previous attempts. Better, Swifthawk nodded. Again. As Rose reached for another arrow, a distant sound caught their attention, the jingling of bridle chains. Swifthawk's hand closed around her wrist, instantly alert. Leave the bow, he whispered. Back to cabin, now. They moved swiftly through the underbrush, Swifthawk leading them along a route that left minimal traces. From the ridge above his property, they could see 3 riders approaching, one in a tan duster that Rose recognized with a surge of dread. Peterson, she breathed. The one in front. Swifthawk's face hardened. Inside. Change clothes. In the cabin, he pulled a worn Apache garment from a chest, a woman's dress of softened deerskin with simple decorations. Put this on. Quick. Rose changed hurriedly, letting her hair fall loose around her shoulders. Swifthawk assessed her with a critical eye, then reached for a small clay pot on a shelf. With practiced movements, he applied a reddish pigment to her cheeks and forehead. Red ochre, he explained. Sacred paint. The transformation was subtle but effective. With her fair skin darkened by weeks in the sun and the traditional clothing, she could pass for mixed-blood Apache from a distance. If they ask, "You are my brother's widow from Mescalero lands?" Swifthawk instructed. "You speak little English. Let me talk." Rose nodded, heart pounding as hoofbeats approached the cabin. Swifthawk removed something from around his neck, a small leather pouch on a cord, decorated with intricate quillwork in vibrant yellows and reds. "Wear this," he said, placing it over her head. "Medicine pouch. Protection." The pouch rested against her chest, surprisingly heavy for its size. "What's in it?" "Sacred things. Eagle feather. Stone from mountain. My son's first tooth." His voice held a rare vulnerability. "Now sit by fire. Look down when they come." Peterson's voice carried through the cabin walls, demanding, impatient. Swifthawk squared his shoulders and stepped outside, closing the door behind him. Through a crack in the logs, Rose watched the confrontation. Peterson sat astride his horse, flanked by Jenkins and another ranch hand. His face was flushed with either sun or whiskey, his substantial frame straining against a tailored vest. "We're looking for a girl," Peterson announced without preamble. "Runaway. Stole money and valuables." Swifthawk stood impassive. "No white girl here." Peterson's eyes narrowed. "Mind if we look around?" "She's a thief and a liar. Dangerous to harbor." This is Apache land, Swifthawk replied evenly. Protected by treaty, Jenkins spat. Treaties don't protect thieves. Or murderers, the third man added. Rose's blood ran cold. Murderers? Peterson leaned forward in his saddle. Girl killed a man on her way out. Pushed my cook down the stairs when he caught her stealing. Died yesterday. The lie was so bold it momentarily stole Rose's breath. Old Thomas, the cook, had been kind to her, the only one who'd warned her about Peterson's reputation with young women. The medicine pouch seemed to grow heavier against her chest as Peterson continued. Sheriffs formed a posse. Rewards up to $50 now. He studied Swifthawk. That's good money for information, Indian. Swifthawk's posture remained unchanged. No white girl here. Only family. Peterson's gaze shifted to the cabin. What family? My brother's widow. From south. Swifthawk's tone discouraged further questions. For a terrible moment, Peterson stared at the cabin door, considering. Rose clutched the medicine pouch, its contents pressing against her palm. Small objects that had witnessed birth and death and survival. Check the barn, Peterson ordered Jenkins. Rose heard movement as the man dismounted. Swifthawk didn't interfere as Jenkins thrust open the barn door, disturbing the chickens inside. After a few minutes, he emerged. Nothing, he reported. Just got Apache stuff in there? Peterson's frustration was visible. We'll keep looking. These hills aren't that big. His gaze returned to Swifthawk. If you see her, $50. More than you'd make in a year. Swifthawk's reply was stone. I have what I need. As the riders departed, Rose remained motionless by the fire, the medicine pouch a talisman between her fingers. Only when Swifthawk returned did she release the breath she'd been holding. They called me a murderer, she whispered. Swifthawk's face was grim. Men like Peterson make their own truth. What do we do now? He reclaimed his seat across from her, eyes reflecting the flames. Now we prepare. They will return. We can't stay here, Rose said, pacing the cabin floor. Night had fallen, but sleep eluded them both. They'll come back with more men. Swifthawk sat cross-legged on a buffalo hide, methodically sharpening his knife against a whetstone. The steady rhythm of steel against stone punctuated the silence between them. This is my home, he replied, his voice quiet but firm. I do not run. They called me a murderer. Rose's fingers twisted in the deerskin dress she still wore. They'll hang me if they find me. They will not find you. Swifthawk tested the knife's edge against his thumb. Not as you are now. Rose stopped pacing. What do you mean? Swifthawk set aside his knife and rose, moving to a small trunk near his sleeping pallet. From it, he withdrew a leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age and exposure. My father kept this, he said, opening the book carefully. When government men came to teach our people civilized ways, Rose approached, curious. Inside were neat columns of English writing, interspersed with strange symbols she assumed were Apache. Swifthawk turned the pages slowly, until he found what he sought, a hand-drawn map. This shows old Apache trails, he explained. Places where our people traveled, hidden from white eyes. Rose studied the map, intricate lines winding through mountain passes and across deserts, with small symbols marking locations along the routes. These could lead us anywhere, she breathed, to safety, if needed. Swifthawk traced one path with his finger. This goes to mountains 3 days' ride south. My mother's cousin lived there once. May still be Apache there. Rose looked up at him, surprised. You'd leave? After saying this was your home? Something shifted in Swifthawk's expression, a softening around the eyes that Rose had come to recognize as rare vulnerability. Home is not always a place, he said. Simply, the implication hung in the air between them. Rose found herself unable to hold his gaze, instead focusing on the journal's weathered pages. What do these symbols mean? She asked, pointing to marks alongside the trails. Water, shelter, danger. Swifthawk's finger traced each in turn. My grandfather drew these when he was young. Before the reservation time, Rose realized what he was offering. Not just escape, but access to knowledge few white people had ever seen. The trust implicit in the gesture wasn't lost on her. Teach me to read it, she said. Swift Hawk studied her for a long moment, then nodded. He sat beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, and began explaining the symbols that had guided his people for generations. Hours passed as they bent over the journal, Swift Hawk patient in his explanations, Rose determined to understand. Dawn was approaching when they finally rested, the book open between them on the table. "We should sleep," Swift Hawk said, rubbing his eyes. Rose nodded, suddenly aware of their proximity. In the weeks she'd lived here, they had maintained careful distance, Swift Hawk out of respect, Rose from lingering caution. Now something had shifted. "Swift Hawk," she said hesitantly. "Thank you for trusting me with this." He was silent for a moment. "You are no longer just a white girl hiding in my barn. What am I then?" The question escaped before she could reconsider. Swift Hawk closed the journal gently. "Someone who learns Apache ways. Someone who—" He paused, searching for words. "Someone who sees with different eyes now." Rose understood what he couldn't quite express. She was no longer merely a fugitive, and he was no longer simply her protector. The boundaries between them had blurred, creating something new and undefined. "If we leave," she asked, "would we come back?" "Perhaps." Swift Hawk's hand rested on the journal. "When it is safe. And if it's never safe, then we find new home." His eyes met hers steadily. "Together." The word hung between them, together, heavy with implication. Rose felt a tightness in her chest that wasn't entirely fear. "I'll go wherever you think best," she said finally. Swift Hawk nodded, decision made. "We prepare tomorrow. Leave before next full moon." As he returned the journal to its trunk, Rose watched him move in the dim light. 3 months ago, she would have been terrified at the thought of fleeing into the wilderness with an Apache man. Now, strangely, it felt like the only path forward that made sense. Outside, the first birds began their morning songs. A new day approaching, and with it plans for a journey neither of them had anticipated. Rose touched the medicine pouch still hanging around her neck, feeling the small treasures within that Swift Hawk had entrusted to her protection. Perhaps home wasn't a place after all, but the trust that grew between two unlikely companions. Preparations for departure consumed the next 3 days. Swift Hawk taught Rose how to pack efficiently, taking only what was necessary for survival. Food, weapons, medicine, and tools were carefully selected and distributed between 2 packs. "We travel light," Swift Hawk explained. "Move fast. Leave little trace." Rose worked alongside him, surprising herself with how much she had learned. Her hands now moved confidently as she preserved meat, identified useful plants, and fashioned a water skin from a gourd. On the evening of the 3rd day, Swift Hawk disappeared into the woods alone. He returned at dusk, carrying a bundle wrapped in rawhide. "What's that?" Rose asked, looking up from the moccasins she was repairing. Swift Hawk unwrapped the bundle on the table. Inside lay a bow, smaller than his hunting bow, but larger than the practice one she had been using. Its surface was polished to a warm glow, with intricate carvings along its length. "For you," he said. "Made from lightning-struck juniper. Strong wood. Good medicine." Rose took it reverently, feeling its perfect balance. "You made this when?" "Started when you first asked to learn. Finished today." His eyes held a rare warmth. "A warrior needs a proper weapon." "I'm hardly a warrior," Rose protested, though she couldn't help running her fingers along the smooth wood. "You survived Peterson. You learn Apache ways. You prepare to face wilderness." Swift Hawk's voice held conviction. "Warrior spirit does not always carry war club." Rose tested the bow's draw, feeling its resistance, challenging but not impossible for her strength. "Thank you." "It's beautiful." Swift Hawk nodded, pleased with her reaction. "Tomorrow, I show you how to make arrows for it. Then we finish preparations." Later that night, unable to sleep, Rose sat outside the cabin beneath a blanket of stars. The bough lay across her lap, its weight comforting. She traced the carvings with her fingertips, recognizing symbols she had learned from Swift Hawk's journal: protection, strength, endurance. The cabin door opened, and Swift Hawk emerged. Without speaking, he settled beside her on the rough-hewn bench. "Can't sleep?" she asked. He shook his head. "Many thoughts." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the night sky. Rose realized how much had changed since she first huddled terrified in his barn. The Apache warrior, who had once seemed so forbidding, was now the only person in the world she trusted completely. "Swift Hawk," she said hesitantly. "What happens if we find your mother's people?" He considered the question. "We would be welcome. As family. Both of us?" Rose's doubt crept into her voice. "I'm not Apache. You live Apache ways now. Learn our language. Respect our beliefs." His shoulder brushed against hers, a small but deliberate contact. "You would be accepted." Rose thought about this. A white woman living among the Apache, perhaps for the rest of her life. The idea should have been frightening, yet somehow it wasn't. "And if we don't find them?" she asked. "Then we find our own way." Swifthawk's voice held certainty. "Together." That word again, together. It carried more weight each time he said it. A shooting star streaked across the sky, and Swifthawk pointed upward. "Good sign. Spirit ancestors watching over journey," Rose smiled. "My father used to say shooting stars were angels racing across heaven." Swifthawk considered this. Different words. Same truth, maybe. The philosophical observation surprised her. "I never thought of it that way." "Many paths to same mountain," he replied. "Apache wisdom." Rose turned to study his profile in the starlight, the strong jaw, the proud nose, the eyes that missed nothing. When had she begun to find beauty in features so different from those she'd been raised to admire? "We should rest," Swifthawk said, standing. "Long preparation tomorrow." Rose nodded, though she made no move to rise. "I'll come soon." As Swifthawk reached the cabin door, he paused. "Rose." She looked up, surprised by the rare use of her name on his lips. "The bow is not just a weapon," he said quietly. "It is promise. My promise to teach. Your promise to learn. Our promise to protect each other." Before she could respond, he disappeared inside, leaving Rose alone with the stars and the bow that represented far more than its wooden form. She ran her fingers over the carvings once more, understanding now that Swifthawk had been working on this gift even before they had decided to leave together, as if some part of him had always known their paths were meant to continue side by side. The realization warmed her more than any fire could have done. The day of departure arrived with a dawn painted in fierce oranges and reds. Rose stood beside Swifthawk's painted mare, adjusting the packs one final time while he secured the cabin. "Blood sky," Swifthawk observed, joining her. "Powerful day for new beginnings." Rose nodded, though anxiety knotted her stomach. The wilderness beyond Swifthawk's small homestead suddenly seemed vast and forbidding. "Are you certain about the route?" she asked. Swifthawk mounted his stallion with practiced ease. "First to Thunder Canyon, then follow old trails south." He extended his hand. "Ready?" Rose took a deep breath and grasped his forearm, allowing him to pull her up behind him. The closeness was still new, his back solid against her chest, his hair brushing her cheek. She had insisted they ride double, leading the mare with their supplies. "Safer together," she had argued, and after brief consideration, Swifthawk had agreed. They rode in silence as the sun climbed higher, leaving behind the only safe haven Rose had known since fleeing Peterson's ranch. She didn't look back, focusing instead on the rhythm of the horse beneath them and the warmth of Swifthawk's presence. By midday, they reached a series of rocky formations that Swifthawk identified as the entrance to Thunder Canyon. He dismounted and helped Rose down, then led the horses into a narrow passage between towering sandstone walls. "Water ahead," he promised as they picked their way carefully over loose stone. The canyon widened into a hidden grotto where a small spring bubbled from the rock face, creating a shallow pool surrounded by vegetation. Swifthawk nodded with satisfaction. "Good, not dried up." He began unloading the mare. "We rest here. Continue at sunset." As Rose helped establish their small camp, Swifthawk disappeared briefly into a crevice in the canyon wall. He returned carrying what appeared to be a small stone figurine, roughly the size of his palm. "What's that?" Rose asked, pausing in her work. Swifthawk held it out for her inspection. The figurine depicted a bear standing upright, carved from reddish stone, with black streaks running through it. Though crude by some standards, its power was undeniable. Something in the stance and the curve of the claws captured the essence of the animal's strength. "Bear medicine," Swifthawk explained. "Left by my grandfather's father, many journeys ago." Rose's eyes widened. "It's been here all this time?" Swifthawk nodded. "Sacred place for my family. Many generations." He gestured to the small cavern. "Inside, more signs, handprints, stories painted on stone. May I see them?" Swifthawk hesitated, then nodded. "Come." The crevice opened into a space just large enough for them to stand. As Rose's eyes adjusted to the dimness, she gasped. The walls were covered with red ochre handprints and stylized paintings of animals, warriors and symbols similar to those in Swifthawk's journal. "My ancestors," Swifthawk said quietly. "Their stories." Rose moved closer to one wall, careful not to touch the ancient markings. "What do they say?" "Many things. Hunts, battles, vision quests." Swifthawk pointed to a series of symbols. "This tells of great drought. This of meeting with mountain spirits." The reverence in his voice was palpable. Rose understood she was being granted a privilege few outsiders had ever received. "Why show me this?" she asked. Swifthawk studied her face in the filtered light. "You are part of Journey now. Should know who travels with you. Your ancestors." "Yes." He placed the bear figurine in a small niche that seemed made for it. "They watch over us." They emerged into the sunlight, and Rose saw Swifthawk differently, not just as the solitary warrior she had met, but as a man connected to generations of history and tradition. As they shared a simple meal of dried meat and pinole, Rose found herself wondering about her own ancestors. "My grandfather came from Ireland," she offered. "He used to tell stories of little people who lived in the hills." Swifthawk nodded, accepting her offering of personal history. "All people have spirits, different names, same power. Is that what you believe? That all spiritual paths lead to the same place?" He considered this. "I believe land speaks many languages. Some hear Apache words. Some hear other words. Land still speaks." The philosophical depth of his answer struck Rose. This man, whom many whites would dismiss as primitive, possessed wisdom that transcended the boundaries others tried to place around him. As evening approached, Swifthawk retrieved the bear figurine and wrapped it carefully in a piece of soft hide. "We take with us now," he explained. "Protection for Journey. Won't your descendants need to find it here?" Rose asked. Swifthawk's expression grew solemn. "You and I may be last to walk this path. Times change. Old ways fade." The sadness in his voice touched something deep within Rose. On impulse, she reached for his hand. "Not while we remember them." His fingers tightened around hers briefly, a rare moment of physical connection that spoke more than words could have done. As twilight descended, they prepared to continue their journey. The bear figurine, now secured in Swifthawk's saddlebag, would travel with them, a tangible link to the past as they moved toward an uncertain future. 3 days into their journey, the terrain grew increasingly challenging. Rocky slopes gave way to steep ravines, forcing them to dismount frequently and lead the horses through treacherous passages. Despite the difficulty, Swifthawk moved with unwavering confidence, following markers invisible to Rose's untrained eye. "How do you know we're still on the right path?" she asked, as they paused to rest in the shadow of a towering rock formation. Swifthawk pointed to a seemingly ordinary pile of stones. "Apache sign. This one means safe water ahead." He gestured toward distant pinnacles. "Next camp there before sundown." Rose marveled at his ability to read the landscape. Under his tutelage, she was beginning to notice subtle details, the way certain cacti indicated underground water, how game trails revealed the easiest passages through difficult terrain. By late afternoon, dark clouds gathered on the horizon. Swifthawk studied the sky with concern. "Storm coming. We must reach shelter." They pushed forward at a faster pace, the wind rising around them. The first heavy drops began to fall as they reached a series of shallow caves set into a cliff face. Swifthawk led the horses into the largest opening. just as thunder cracked overhead. Good timing, Rose observed. Helping to unload their essentials, Swifthawk nodded, securing the horses before exploring deeper into the cave. Rose busied herself organizing their supplies, laying out bedrolls, and preparing a small fire near the entrance where the smoke could escape. When Swifthawk returned, his expression was thoughtful. "Cave goes back further than I remembered." "Come." Rose followed him deeper, where the passage narrowed before opening into a second chamber. Swifthawk raised his torch, illuminating the space. "Oh," Rose breathed, amazed. The ceiling of the chamber was covered with crystalline formations that captured and reflected the torchlight, creating a constellation of sparkles above them. But what drew Rose's attention was the far wall, where a natural shelf held a row of clay vessels, some broken, others remarkably intact. Swifthawk approached reverently. "Ancient ones left these, from before Apache time." Rose stayed back, sensing the sacredness of the discovery. "How old?" "Many hundreds of years, perhaps 1,000. Swifthawk carefully examined one of the intact pots, a black vessel decorated with geometric patterns in white. "They're beautiful," Rose murmured. Swifthawk nodded, then pointed to markings on the cave wall beside the vessels, faded paintings of spiral patterns and human-like figures with elaborate headdresses. "Spirit journey drawings," he explained. "Medicine men would come to such places to seek visions." As thunder rumbled outside, Swifthawk selected the smallest of the intact vessels, a shallow bowl with a zigzag pattern encircling its rim. He held it toward the light, examining its craftsmanship. "We will use this," he decided. "Make offering for safe passage." Rose watched as he carried the ancient bowl back to their camp near the cave entrance. There, he placed it carefully between them and filled it with water from his canteen. From his medicine pouch, he sprinkled dried herbs onto the water's surface. "Sit," he instructed. When Rose complied, he continued, "Storm brings power. Good time for prayer." Outside, lightning flashed, briefly illuminating the cave in stark white light. Swifthawk began a low chant in Apache, his voice blending with the storm's fury. Rose sat quietly, respecting the ceremony, though she didn't understand the words. After several minutes, Swifthawk fell silent. He dipped his finger into the bowl and drew a line of water down his forehead and nose. "Your turn," he said, gesturing for Rose to do the same. Hesitantly, she touched the water and mimicked his action. The liquid felt cool against her skin, grounding her somehow amidst the storm's chaos. "What does it mean?" she asked. "Connecting to Earth's water, to sky's water." Swifthawk's eyes reflected the firelight. "Reminding ourselves we are part of bigger circle." Rose nodded, unexpectedly moved by the simple ritual. "Thank you for sharing this with me." Swifthawk studied her face. "You learn to see with Apache eyes now." "Good." They sat in companionable silence as the storm raged outside, sharing a meal of dried meat and cakes made from ground mesquite beans. The ancient bowl remained between them, a bridge between past and present. "Swifthawk," Rose ventured finally. "If we find your mother's people, will you stay with them?" The question had been weighing on her mind. What would become of them if they reached their destination? Swifthawk considered before answering. "Perhaps. For winter at least." His eyes met hers across the fire. "What will you do?" It was the first time he had asked about her intentions. Rose realized she hadn't thought beyond escape. "I don't know," she admitted. "I have nowhere else to go. You have place with me," Swifthawk said simply. "If you choose." The words hung between them, weighted with meaning. Rose felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. "I'd like that," she said softly. Something shifted in Swifthawk's expression, a tension releasing. He nodded once, then reached for the ancient bowl. With deliberate movements, he poured the remaining water onto the cave floor. "Offering complete," he said. "Ancestors, hear our intentions." Outside, as if in response, the storm began to subside, the thunder growing more distant. Rose wondered if it was coincidence or something more, one of the mysteries of Swifthawk's world that she was only beginning to understand. Morning arrived with clearing skies and renewed purpose. As they prepared to continue their journey, Swifthawk studied the distant mountains with focused intent. 2 more days, he estimated. Then we reach Whiteflower Canyon. My mother's people had summer camp there. Rose nodded, securing their packs. The mention of other Apache brought mixed emotions. Hope for Swifthawk to reunite with his kin, apprehension about her own reception. Despite his assurances, she wondered how a white woman would truly be welcomed. They traveled steadily through the day, the terrain gradually changing from rocky outcroppings to pine-covered slopes. By late afternoon, they had climbed high enough that Rose could see for miles across the wilderness they had traversed. The perspective was humbling. "It's beautiful," she murmured, pausing to take in the view. Swifthawk nodded. "Apache land. True home. Your home," Rose corrected gently. His eyes met hers. "Our home now, if you choose it." The simple statement carried profound weight. Rose felt something shift within her, the last remnants of her old identity giving way to something new and undefined. As dusk approached, Swifthawk led them to a small clearing beside a stream. Good place to camp, protected. While Rose prepared their evening meal, Swifthawk disappeared briefly into the surrounding forest. He returned carrying a bundle of freshly cut pine boughs. "For sleeping," he explained. "Softer than ground. Keeps away damp." As they arranged the boughs, Swifthawk paused, his attention caught by something on the forest floor. He knelt, brushing aside needles to reveal a small object partially buried in the earth. "What is it?" Rose asked, joining him. Swifthawk carefully unearthed a stone pipe, its bowl carved in the shape of an eagle's head. Though weathered by time, the craftsmanship remained evident in the detailed feathers and fierce eyes. "Grandfather's pipe," he said, voice hushed with surprise. "Your grandfather's?" Rose questioned. "How can you be sure?" Swifthawk traced the eagle's features with reverent fingers. "This mark his sign." He indicated a small symbol etched into the stem. "He lost this pipe many winters ago. On hunting trip. Never found. The coincidence seemed too great to be mere chance." Rose watched as Swifthawk cleaned the pipe with gentle care, removing decades of soil from its crevices. "Is it still usable?" And she asked, "Yes, sacred things endure." His expression grew distant. "Grandfather was great medicine man. Had powerful dreams that guided our people." Round the campfire that night, Swifthawk prepared the pipe with a mixture of herbs from his pouch. His movements were ceremonial, each action performed with deliberate precision. "What are you doing?" Rose asked softly. "Honoring ancestors." "Seeking guidance?" Swifthawk struck a match, lighting the pipe's contents. "Important ritual before entering tribal lands." He drew deeply, then released the smoke in 4 directions before offering the pipe to Rose. She hesitated. "I don't know how." "Not necessary to inhale," he explained. "Just hold, honor the connection to earth and sky." Rose accepted the pipe, feeling its weight, both physical and symbolic. Following Swifthawk's example, she raised it to each direction before returning it to him. The ritual continued in silence, the fragrant smoke rising to mingle with the sparks from their fire. When finished, Swifthawk wrapped the pipe carefully in a piece of soft hide. "Grandfather speaks through this pipe," he said finally. "Tells me our path is good. What else does he say?" Rose asked, drawn into the moment's solemnity. Swifthawk's eyes reflected the firelight. "That some things lost return when needed most." The words seemed to hang in the night air, carrying meaning beyond the recovered pipe. Rose felt them settle within her, a truth that applied to them both. She had lost everything familiar, only to find unexpected belonging. Swifthawk had lost his people, yet seemed to be finding his way back, both to his ancestral connections and to human companionship. "Swifthawk," she ventured, "if your grandfather was a medicine man, does that mean you have the same gifts?" He considered the question. "Some knowledge passed to me, not all. I was young when soldiers came, but enough to know the old ways, enough to remember." His gaze was steady, enough to teach. Rose understood the unspoken offer, that the knowledge could continue through her as well. The responsibility was both daunting and strangely right. As they prepared for sleep, Swifthawk placed the eagle pipe between their bedrolls. "Guardian for our dreams," he explained. Rose settled onto her pine bough bed, aware of Swifthawk's presence nearby, close, but maintaining the respectful distance he had always kept. The pipe lay between them, a tangible connection to his past and perhaps to their shared future. "Sleep well," Swifthawk said quietly. "Tomorrow we climb higher." "Higher," Rose echoed, the word carrying multiple meanings as her eyelids grew heavy. Above them, stars wheeled in patterns unchanged, since Swifthawk's grandfather had walked these mountains. Below, the earth cradled them in ancient rhythms of day and night, summer and winter, loss and recovery. In this moment, suspended between past and future, Rose felt truly at peace for the first time since fleeing Peterson's ranch. Whatever awaited them in Whiteflower Canyon, they would face it together. The forest thickened as they climbed higher into the mountains. Pine and spruce gave way to stands of aspen, their leaves shimmering like coins in the breeze. The air grew cooler, carrying the scent of coming autumn. "We make good time," Swifthawk noted as they paused to rest the horses near a mountain stream. "Reach canyon by tomorrow noon," Rose nodded, refilling their water skins while Swifthawk consulted his father's journal. She had grown accustomed to the rhythm of their journey, rising with the sun, traveling through the day's heat, making camp as twilight descended. The simplicity held a freedom she had never known before. "What will we find there?" she asked, joining him. "In Whiteflower Canyon," Swifthawk's expression was guarded. "Perhaps nothing. Perhaps my mother's cousin walking deer and his family. Perhaps others." He closed the journal. "Been many years since I traveled this way." Rose understood his caution. Hope could be dangerous when carried too openly. They continued upward along a game trail, Swifthawk occasionally pointing out tracks, deer, rabbit, once the distinctive print of a mountain lion. Rose absorbed his lessons eagerly, her senses sharpening to the subtle language of the wilderness. By late afternoon, they reached a ridge overlooking a vast valley. Swifthawk reined in his horse, scanning the panorama with narrowed eyes. "Something wrong?" Rose asked, noting his tension. "Smoke." He pointed to a thin column rising from the distant trees. "Not Apache campfire." "Too big?" Rose followed his gaze, fear clutching at her chest. "Settlers?" "Or soldiers?" Swifthawk's jaw tightened. "We go another way." "More hidden." He led them down from the ridge into a densely wooded ravine. The path grew steeper, forcing them to dismount and guide the horses carefully over the rough terrain. Shadows lengthened as the sun dipped behind the mountains, and Rose felt the first stirrings of concern. "Should we make camp?" she suggested. Swifthawk shook his head. "Not yet. Need more distance from smoke." As twilight deepened into dusk, they emerged from the ravine into a small meadow surrounded by towering pines. At its center stood the blackened remains of a massive tree, struck by lightning yet still partially standing, its skeletal branches reaching toward the sky like desperate fingers. "Here," Swifthawk decided. "Good place. Hidden." They established camp efficiently, working together with the wordless coordination of those who have found their rhythm. As Rose prepared their meal, Swifthawk disappeared briefly into the surrounding forest, returning with a handful of wild onions to add to their stew. "The smoke worries you," Rose observed as they ate. Swifthawk nodded. "Changes our path. Must be more careful now." After they had finished eating, he moved toward the lightning-struck tree. In the fading light, Rose watched as he examined its burned trunk, running his hands over the charred surface. "What are you looking for?" she asked, joining him. Instead of answering, Swifthawk reached into a hollow in the trunk and withdrew something wrapped in rotted buckskin. The package crumbled at his touch, revealing a tarnished silver bracelet set with turquoise stones. "My mother's," he said, voice barely audible. Rose's breath caught. "How is that possible?" Swifthawk stared at the bracelet as if it might vanish. "This was meeting place for our family if separated." His fingers closed around the silver band. "She must have left it, hoping someone would find." The implication hung heavy in the cool evening air. His mother had survived long enough to reach this place, to leave this message for whoever might come looking. When? Rose asked gently. After soldiers came, maybe weeks, maybe months. Swifthawk's composure remained, but Rose could see the emotion he controlled. Too long ago now. Rose placed her hand on his arm, feeling the tension in his muscles. She was trying to find you, he nodded once sharply. And I was not here. The guilt in those simple words broke Rose's heart. Without thinking, she moved closer, her arms encircling him in a gesture of comfort that transcended words. For a moment, Swifthawk remained rigid. Then gradually, he allowed himself to lean into her embrace. They stood together beside the lightning-struck tree, connected by shared grief. His for a mother lost, hers for a life abandoned. When Swifthawk finally straightened, his face had regained its usual composure. But something had shifted between them. She would have liked you, he said quietly, slipping the bracelet onto his wrist. Rose felt tears prick her eyes at the simple statement. I wish I could have known her. She lives in here, Swifthawk touched his chest. In stories, I will tell you. Someday. That night, as they settled by their small fire, Swifthawk sat closer than usual, the silver bracelet gleaming dully on his wrist. Neither mentioned the embrace by the tree, yet its memory remained. A boundary crossed. A connection deepened. Tomorrow, Swifthawk said, breaking the comfortable silence, we reach White Flower Canyon. Whatever we find there, we face together, Rose finished when he trailed off. He nodded, his dark eyes reflecting the firelight. Your place is with me now, he said simply. The words echoed those he had spoken when she first arrived at his cabin, but their meaning had transformed. No longer merely an offer of shelter, they had become an acknowledgement of something neither was yet ready to name. Dawn broke with a blanket of mist clinging to the mountainside. Swifthawk and Rose broke camp quietly, each wrapped in private thoughts. The silver bracelet remained on Swifthawk's wrist, a tangible connection to his past. Their path grew steeper as morning advanced, winding through dense forest and across rocky slopes. Swifthawk moved with increasing urgency, checking landmarks against his father's journal with focused intensity. We're close, he announced as they crested a ridge around midday. Below them stretched a narrow canyon, its walls striated with bands of red and gold stone. A small stream traced a silver path along its floor, bordered by cottonwoods and willows. White Flower Canyon, Rose breathed, taking in the peaceful scene. Swifthawk nodded, his eyes scanning for signs of habitation. No smoke, no horses. His voice held carefully controlled disappointment. They descended into the canyon, alert for any indication of recent Apache presence. As they reached the canyon floor, Swifthawk dismounted, examining the ground with practiced eyes. Old fire rings, he reported, crouching beside a circle of stones. Not used this summer. Rose's heart ached for him. Perhaps they come at different times now. Perhaps. His tone suggested otherwise. They followed the stream deeper into the canyon, where the walls rose higher and closer together. Swifthawk pointed out features with remembered familiarity, a natural spring, berry patches, locations where particular medicinal plants grew. My mother taught me here, he explained, indicating a flat stone beside the stream. How to prepare hides, make medicine, speak with spirits. Rose could almost see the canyon as it once was, alive with the activities of Swifthawk's people, children playing along the stream banks, women working hides, men returning from hunts. Now it stood empty, another piece of Apache life reclaimed by silence. As afternoon waned, they reached a widening in the canyon where several caves opened in the northern wall. Swifthawk approached these with reverence, pausing before the largest opening. Winter shelters, he explained. My mother's cousin Walking Deer used this one. The cave entrance was partially blocked by fallen rocks, evidence of years without maintenance. Swifthawk cleared enough space for them to enter, then disappeared into the darkness. Rose waited outside, allowing him this moment of private reckoning with his hopes. When he emerged, his expression was unreadable. Without speaking, he began gathering wood for a fire near the cave entrance. Rose helped, respecting his silence. As twilight deepened into night, they sat beside the small fire, sheltered by the overhanging rock. Swift-Hawk had spoken little since their arrival, but Rose sensed his need to process this homecoming that was not quite the reunion he had perhaps secretly hoped for. "What will we do now?" she finally asked. Swift-Hawk stirred the fire with a stick. "Rest here a few days, then decide." The uncertainty hung between them, a journey completed, but without the resolution anticipated. Rose wondered if he regretted bringing her so far, only to find abandonment. "I'm sorry they're not here," she offered gently. Swift-Hawk looked up, his dark eyes reflecting the firelight. "They lived after the soldiers. That is something." He reached into his shirt and withdrew a small object, a carved wooden flute with faded paint still visible along its length. Rose hadn't seen it before, found inside, he explained. "Walking Deer's flute. He would not leave this willingly. What do you think happened?" Swift-Hawk examined the instrument carefully. "Reservation, maybe. Government men came, forced many Apache to go, but not you. I was hunting, far from camp. When I returned, he didn't need to finish." Rose had heard enough to understand. He had returned to destruction, just as he had after the soldiers took his wife and child. Swift-Hawk raised the flute to his lips, hesitated, then blew softly. A haunting note emerged, followed by another. The simple melody floated through the canyon, echoing off the stone walls, perhaps the first music these rocks had heard in years. Rose closed her eyes, letting the melancholy tune wash over her. When Swift-Hawk finished, the silence seemed deeper than before. "Beautiful," she whispered. "Song for those gone ahead," he explained. "Tells them we remember." Rose watched as he carefully wrapped the flute in a piece of soft hide. "Will you keep it?" "Yes, until I find Walking Deer again. Return what belongs to him." The determination in his voice spoke of a new purpose, one beyond their escape from Peterson. Swift-Hawk was reclaiming more than artifacts. He was gathering the scattered pieces of his heritage. As they prepared for sleep in the ancient shelter of his ancestors, Rose realized their journey had changed. What had begun as flight had transformed into something more profound, a return, a reconnection, a rebirth. "Swift-Hawk," she said as they settled onto their bedrolls. "Thank you for bringing me here, for showing me this part of your life." In the dim light she saw him nod. "This place is sacred. Like my mother's bracelet, like Walking Deer's flute." His voice softened. "Sacred things should be shared with those we—" He paused, searching for the right word. "Those we trust." The simple statement warmed her more than the fire. Trust, Rose understood, was Swift-Hawk's most precious gift. Harder won and more valuable than any silver bracelet or carved flute. Outside, the moon rose over Whiteflower Canyon, painting the ancient walls with silver light, the same light that had witnessed generations of Apache life and would witness whatever path they chose next. 3 days passed. In the peaceful seclusion of Whiteflower Canyon, Rose and Swift-Hawk established a temporary home in Walking Deer's cave, clearing debris and making it habitable once more. During daylight hours, Swift-Hawk taught Rose the canyon's secrets, where to find wild onions and berries, how to identify the plants his mother had once shown him, which cave paintings told stories of creation and which recorded historical events. On the 4th morning, Rose woke to find Swift-Hawk already gone from his sleeping place. She emerged from the cave to discover him kneeling beside the stream, carefully arranging something on a flat stone. "What are you doing?" she asked, approaching. Swift-Hawk looked up, his expression serene. Before him lay a collection of small objects, colorful stones, feathers, dried plants, and in the center a piece of paper folded into a strange geometric shape. "Making decision bundle," he explained. "Old Apache way to find path when mind is unclear." Rose sat beside him, careful not to disturb his arrangement. "How does it work?" "Each thing represents different choice." He pointed to a red stone. "Return to my cabin," a blue stone. "Search for Walking Deer at reservation," a feather. "Begin new journey elsewhere." Rose's eyes were drawn to the folded paper at the center. "And that?" Swift-Hawk hesitated. "That is you. Your choice." He handed her the paper construction. "I made while you slept." Rose turned the object in her hands, marveling at its complexity, a series of folds that created a flower-like shape that could expand and contract. Such delicate work from his strong hands surprised her. "It's beautiful," she said. "But I don't understand." "Paper flower," Swifthawk explained. "My father learned from Mexican trader. Taught me when I was boy." His eyes held hers. "White flower for White Flower Canyon. Place of decision." Rose gently opened and closed the paper flower, watching how it transformed with each movement. "What is my choice in this?" Swifthawk looked out across the canyon. "To stay with me, or find your own path." The simple statement carried immense weight. Until now, their partnership had been born of necessity, her need for protection, his willingness to provide it. But they had reached a crossroads where necessity no longer bound them. "Where would I go?" she asked quietly. "California, perhaps. Many women make new start there." He kept his gaze on the distant rocks. "Or return east. Find family." "I have no family left," Rose reminded him. "Then new beginning. As teacher, maybe." "You read well, write well." Rose studied his profile, realizing he was offering her freedom, even at the cost of their companionship. The selflessness of the gesture touched her deeply. "And if I choose to stay with you?" she asked. "What then?" Swifthawk finally turned to her, his expression open and vulnerable in a way she had rarely seen. "Then we find path together. Whatever path spirits show us." Rose looked down at the paper flower in her hands, understanding now its significance. Like her, it was something transformed, paper made from trees, reimagined through human hands into something new and beautiful. "I've already decided," she said softly. "My place is with you, Swifthawk, if you'll have me." Something shifted in his eyes, relief perhaps, or joy carefully contained. He nodded once, then took the paper flower from her hands and placed it deliberately beside the blue stone. "Then we search for walking deer," he declared. Together. The decision made, Swifthawk gathered the objects into a small pouch, which he secured at his waist. Rose felt a strange certainty settle over her, a sense that they had just committed to something far more significant than a mere journey. That afternoon, while Swifthawk hunted, Rose explored deeper into the canyon, thinking about the choice she had made. Near a stand of cottonwoods, a flash of white caught her eye. Bending down, she discovered a small flower growing improbably from a crack in the rocky ground, 5 delicate white petals surrounding a golden center. "White flower," she murmured, understanding suddenly how the canyon had earned its name. She carefully picked the bloom, an idea forming. When Swifthawk returned with a rabbit for their evening meal, Rose was waiting by the fire, the flower preserved between pages of his father's journal. "I found something," she said, showing him the pressed blossom. "Can you teach me how to preserve it?" "Like your mother would have done." Swifthawk's expression softened as he examined the white flower. "This is rare. Blooms only after rain." He looked up at her. "Good medicine. Sign of new beginnings." As twilight settled over the canyon, Swifthawk taught Rose how to dry the flower properly, then how to incorporate it into a small woven pouch similar to his medicine bag. His hands guided hers with gentle precision, their fingers occasionally brushing in ways that no longer felt accidental. "There," he said when they had finished. "Your first medicine pouch." Rose held the small creation, rough compared to his skilled work, but made meaningful by their shared effort. "What does it protect against?" Swifthawk's mouth curved in a rare smile. "Not against, for." He touched the pouch lightly. "For holding dreams that grow from stone." The poetry of his words reminded Rose again that this man, whom many whites would dismiss as primitive, possessed wisdom and beauty of expression that transcended cultural boundaries. As darkness fell, they sat closer than usual beside their fire, the decision bundle secure at Swifthawk's waist, Rose's new medicine pouch hanging around her neck. Tomorrow they would begin planning their journey to find walking deer, but tonight belonged to the quiet acknowledgement of the choice they had made, to face whatever came next, not as protector and protected, but as true companions. The San Carlos Reservation lies 5 days' ride west, Swifthawk explained, tracing the route on a map he had sketched in the dirt. Many Apache forced there by soldiers. Walking Deer's family may be among them. Rose studied the crude map, memorizing landmarks and water sources. After a week in Whiteflower Canyon, they had finalized their plans and were preparing to depart the following morning. "Will it be dangerous?" And she asked. Swifthawk's expression was grave. "For Apache man and white woman traveling together? Yes, always danger." The reality of their situation had never truly disappeared, but the peaceful days in the canyon had provided temporary shelter from such concerns. Now preparing to venture back into the world of white settlements and army patrols, they faced renewed risks. "We need a story," Rose suggested. "If anyone stops us," Swifthawk nodded. "You could be missionary woman. I guide you to reservation. Would they believe that?" "Perhaps. Many God-talking women go to teach Apache children." Rose considered this, trying to imagine herself in such a role. "I know some Bible verses. My mother was religious. Good, remember them." Swifthawk stood, brushing dirt from his hands. "One more thing to do before we leave." He led her deeper into the canyon, to a narrow side passage they hadn't yet explored. The walls closed in around them as they followed a barely visible trail that wound between towering rock formations. "Where are we going?" Rose asked, ducking beneath a low-hanging ledge. "Sacred place," Swifthawk replied. "My grandfather showed my father. My father showed me." The passage eventually opened into a small, circular grotto, completely enclosed by sheer rock walls. Rose gasped as she stepped into the space. Above them, the canyon walls rose hundreds of feet, meeting in a narrow opening that allowed a single shaft of sunlight to penetrate the depths. The light illuminated the center of the grotto, where a simple stone altar stood. "What is this place?" she whispered, awed by the natural cathedral. "Speaking place," Swifthawk answered. "Where Apache come to hear ancestors, to make important decisions." He approached the altar reverently. From his pouch, he removed a small object wrapped in buckskin and placed it carefully on the stone surface. Unwrapping it, he revealed a perfectly formed arrowhead crafted from translucent white stone. "Ghost stone," he explained, noting Rose's curious expression. "Very rare. Very powerful." The arrowhead seemed to capture the shaft of sunlight, glowing with an inner luminescence that transfixed Rose. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "My father gave to me when I became man. Said I would know when to use it." Swifthawk positioned the arrowhead precisely in the center of the altar. "Time is now." He motioned for Rose to join him beside the altar. When she stood at his side, he began to speak in Apache, a rhythmic, musical chant that echoed off the stone walls. Though she couldn't understand the words, Rose felt their power, the way they seemed to connect Swifthawk to something ancient and enduring. When he finished, he switched to English. "We ask for clear path, for protection on journey, for wisdom to find Walking Deer and other Apache who remember old ways." Rose bowed her head, adding her own silent prayer to his spoken one. The shaft of sunlight had moved slightly, catching the ghost stone arrowhead at a new angle and sending prismatic reflections dancing. Across the grotto walls, Swifthawk reached for her hand, the first time he had initiated such contact, outside moments of practical necessity. His palm was warm against hers, calloused but gentle. "Apache believe marriage is not ceremony like white people have," he said quietly. "Is decision made by man and woman to walk same path, to face sun and storm together." Rose's heart quickened as she understood what he was suggesting. "Is that what you want? For us to be married in the Apache way?" Swifthawk's dark eyes held hers steadily. "I have watched you learn our ways, seen your strength, your kind heart." His fingers tightened slightly around hers. "Yes, it is what I want, but only if you choose same path freely." The sincerity in his voice moved her deeply. This man, who had lost so much, was offering her everything he had left, his heart, his knowledge, his future. "I choose you, Swifthawk," she said softly. "I choose our path together." A rare smile transformed his features. Without releasing her hand, he reached for the ghost stone arrowhead and pressed it into her palm, closing her fingers around it. "Then this belongs to you now." To protect, to remind. I can't take this, Rose protested. It's your heritage, and now it is yours also. His certainty brooked no argument. Apache wife carries medicine for family's protection. Ghost stone is strongest medicine, wife. The word echoed in Rose's mind, foreign yet right somehow. Not the kind of marriage she had been raised to expect, but perhaps something truer, a partnership born of mutual respect and choice rather than convention. Swifthawk released her hand, leaving the arrowhead in her possession. We return now. Prepare for journey tomorrow. As they left the grotto, Rose carefully secured the ghost stone in her newly made medicine pouch. The weight of it against her chest felt significant, not a burden, but a tangible connection to Swifthawk and the path they had chosen together. That night, as they sat beside their fire for the last time in Whiteflower Canyon, the distance Swifthawk had always maintained between their sleeping places disappeared. His bedroll now lay beside hers, close enough that she could hear his steady breathing in the darkness. "Your place is with me," he murmured as they settled for sleep. "And mine with you." The words, once an offer of temporary shelter, had become a promise of shared life. Rose closed her fingers around the ghost stone arrowhead through the fabric of her dress, marveling at how far she had come from the frightened girl hiding in a barn during a storm. The journey toward San Carlos proved more challenging than anticipated. 2 days after leaving Whiteflower Canyon, they encountered the first signs of trouble, fresh horse tracks on the trail, too numerous to belong to simple travelers. Cavalry patrol, Swifthawk determined, studying the impressions. Moving east, recent, they altered their route, keeping to higher ground where the rocky terrain would leave fewer traces of their passage. The detour cost them time, but provided greater security as they skirted several small settlements. On the 4th day, they crested a ridge to see a dusty town sprawled in the valley below, wooden buildings clustered around a single street, with scattered homesteads dotting the surrounding landscape. Mesquite Springs, Swifthawk identified it. Last town before reservation land. Rose studied the settlement with apprehension. "Do we need to go through it?" "Need supplies," Swifthawk replied grimly. "And information." They made camp early, concealed in a stand of junipers overlooking the town. As evening approached, Swifthawk outlined his plan. "I stay here." Too dangerous for Apache man in town. He handed Rose a small leather pouch containing their few tradable items, silver buttons, a knife, several coins they had found in Whiteflower Canyon. "You go at dawn. Dress like missionary woman. Buy flour, coffee, learn what you can about reservation." Rose nodded, though anxiety tightened her chest. She hadn't interacted with other whites since fleeing Peterson's ranch months ago. That night, she removed her Apache clothing and washed thoroughly in a nearby stream. Swifthawk watched silently as she donned her original dress, now cleaned and mended but unmistakably white in style. The transformation was striking. With her hair pulled back severely and her skin darkened by months in the sun, she appeared the perfect image of a frontier missionary, weathered but determined. "How do I look?" and she asked, smoothing the worn fabric. "Like white woman again," Swifthawk observed, his expression unreadable. Rose touched the ghost stone arrowhead hidden beneath her collar. "Only on the outside." Dawn found her walking alone down the trail toward Mesquite Springs, her steps measured and purposeful, despite her inner trepidation. The town was just awakening as she entered. Shopkeepers sweeping boardwalks, a wagon delivering goods to the general store. Rose kept her eyes lowered, projecting the demure confidence of a woman on God's mission. The general store stood at the center of town, its windows displaying an assortment of goods unavailable in the wilderness. A bell jangled as she entered. Behind the counter, a balding man looked up from his ledger. "Morning, ma'am," he greeted her. "Don't believe I've seen you before." "Just passing through," Rose replied, adopting a slight Eastern accent. "I'm headed to the San Carlos mission." The shopkeeper's eyebrows rose. "Mission work, is it? Brave calling for a lady alone." "The Lord provides guidance," Rose answered smoothly. Silently thanking her mother for all those Sunday scripture lessons, she selected their needed supplies with care: flour, coffee, salt, a few medical items. As the shopkeeper gathered her purchases, she ventured a question. How are conditions at the reservation these days? It's been some time since I received reports, the man snorted. About what you'd expect. Army keeps them in line, but there's always trouble. Had a group escaped last month, family group headed east, they think. Rose's heart quickened. How terrible. Were they caught? Not yet. He leaned forward conspiratorially. Between us, soldiers got bigger concerns these days. Apache ain't the threat they once were. As he wrapped her purchases, the shopkeeper nodded toward a notice board near the door. Speaking of trouble, keep an eye out for that one if you're traveling. Bad business. Rose glanced at the board and froze. Among the various announcements and wanted posters was a sketched likeness of her own face. Beneath bold letters declaring, Wanted, Rose Miller, murder and theft, $100 reward. With trembling fingers, she paid for her purchases and thanked the shopkeeper, fighting to maintain her composed demeanor. Outside, she forced herself to walk unhurriedly through town, though every instinct screamed for her to run. At the edge of town, a small church stood apart from the other buildings. On impulse, Rose ducked inside, finding it empty, save for rows of rough-hewn pews and a simple wooden cross. She sank onto a bench, setting her packages beside her as she struggled to calm her racing heart. The wanted poster confirmed her worst fears. Peterson hadn't abandoned his pursuit. The accusation of murder still stood, the bounty now doubled. You all right, miss? Rose started at the voice. A man in a black coat, presumably the preacher, had entered from a side door. Yes, thank you, she managed. Just seeking a moment of prayer before continuing my journey. The preacher nodded sympathetically. To the reservation, I assume. I saw your packages. Yes, mission work. God's blessing on your efforts. He moved to the altar, then paused, reaching into his pocket. Almost forgot. If you're heading that way, would you mind delivering something for me? He approached, holding out a small object, a wooden cross pendant suspended on a leather cord, its surface worn smooth by years of handling. One of our converts at San Carlos, a man called Walking Eagle, sent word asking for his father's cross. Found it among our mission records. Rose accepted the pendant with steady hands, though her pulse pounded in her ears. Walking Eagle? Apache convert. One of our success stories, the preacher said proudly. Took a Christian name, Joseph. Has been helping translate scripture. I'll make sure he receives it, Rose promised. Carefully tucking the cross into her pocket, the coincidence seemed too great. Walking Eagle, so similar to Walking Deer. Could Swifthawk's cousin have taken a Christian name? The thought brought both hope and concern. After a brief, genuine prayer for guidance, Rose thanked the preacher and continued on her way, circling wide around the town before ascending the ridge where Swifthawk waited. His relief at her return was evident, though he masked it quickly as she shared her discoveries. The wanted poster, the news of escaped Apache, and most significantly, the wooden cross. Swifthawk examined the pendant carefully, turning it over in his hands. Carved into the back, nearly worn away by time, were initials. W.D., Walking Deer, he confirmed, his voice tight with emotion. This was his secret. Learned white man's religion, but kept Apache name among our people. Rose understood the significance. He's alive. At San Carlos, Swifthawk nodded, securing the cross inside his medicine pouch. And now we find him. The San Carlos reservation appeared first as a dusty smudge on the horizon. As they drew closer, details emerged. Rows of uniformed government-built shacks, military buildings with American flags, fields where Apache people labored under the watchful eyes of soldiers. Swifthawk and Rose observed from a concealed position in the hills, their expressions grim. Prison, Swifthawk said flatly. Not home. Rose couldn't disagree. The natural dignity and freedom she had witnessed in Swifthawk's way of life stood in stark contrast to the regimented existence below. How will we find Walking Deer? She asked. Mission building. Swifthawk pointed to a white-painted structure set apart from the other buildings. Start there. You go as missionary woman. And you? His eyes remained on the reservation. Too dangerous. Soldiers know Apache who leave without permission. I wait here. Rose understood the risk, but hated the separation. What if something goes wrong? Swifthawk removed a small object from his saddlebag, a polished bone whistle carved with intricate designs. Apache Scout whistle, signal used when hunting. He demonstrated 3 short bursts. This means danger. Come quickly. He pressed the whistle into her palm. Keep hidden. Use only if necessary. Rose secured it in her pocket alongside Walking Deer's cross. They had planned her approach carefully over the past 2 days. She would present herself as a missionary, bringing supplies and assessing needs for the church in Mesquite Springs. As twilight approached, Swifthawk helped her prepare. Once again, Rose transformed into her missionary persona, her Apache-made items carefully hidden beneath proper white woman's clothing. Remember, Swifthawk cautioned, find Walking Deer, then leave quickly. Do not stay after dark. Rose nodded, touching the ghost stone arrowhead concealed beneath her collar. I'll be careful. Swifthawk's hand moved to her cheek, a brief tender gesture at odds with his usual reserve. Your spirit is strong, but white man's world is dangerous for us both now. The intimacy of the moment lingered as Rose made her way down toward the reservation. At the perimeter, she was stopped by 2 soldiers who eyed her suspiciously. State your business. Ma'am, the older one demanded. I'm from the Mesquite Springs Church, Rose explained, maintaining her slight Eastern accent. Reverend Phillips sent me with supplies for the mission. The mention of the preacher's name, gleaned from her visit to the church, provided the credibility she needed. After a cursory inspection of her packages, the soldiers waved her through with minimal interest. The reservation was even more dispiriting up close. Apache people moved listlessly between tasks, their traditional clothing replaced by government-issued garments. Children with shorn hair played half-heartedly in the dust. Rose felt eyes following her, some curious, others resentful. The mission building stood as a beacon of relative comfort amidst the squalor. Rose approached its wooden steps with practiced humility, knocking at the door with downcast eyes. A middle-aged white woman in a severe black dress answered. Yes? Good afternoon, Rose greeted her. I'm from Reverend Phillips' congregation in Mesquite Springs. I've brought supplies and a personal item for one of your converts. The woman's stern expression softened slightly. How thoughtful. I'm Mrs. Hargrove, the missionary's wife. Please come in. Inside, the mission was clean and ordered, with biblical texts adorning the walls and a small classroom area where Apache children sat reciting English phrases. My husband is conducting services for the new arrivals, Mrs. Hargrove explained. Which convert did you bring something for? A man called Walking Eagle, Rose replied, using the Christian name. I believe he helps with translations. Mrs. Hargrove nodded. Joseph is one of our most dedicated helpers. Such a blessing to have a native speaker assist with scripture translation. She gestured to a side door. He's in the workroom now, preparing materials for tomorrow's lesson. Rose's heart raced as she was led to a small room where a gray-haired Apache man sat at a desk, carefully transcribing text from an English Bible. Joseph, Mrs. Hargrove called. A visitor from Mesquite Springs has brought something for you. The man looked up, and Rose immediately noted the family resemblance, the same strong features as Swifthawk. Though weathered by age and hardship, thank you. Mrs. Hargrove, he responded in careful English. I can speak with her. When they were alone, Rose approached cautiously. Are you Walking Deer, cousin to Swifthawk? The man's expression remained neutral, but his eyes sharpened with interest. I am called Joseph Walking Eagle now. Who asks about old names? Rose glanced at the door, then lowered her voice. Swifthawk sent me. He waits in the hills. We found your father's cross. She removed the wooden pendant from her pocket, placing it on the desk between them. Walking Deer stared at it for a long moment, then closed his fingers around it with surprising speed. Where is my cousin? He asked, his voice barely audible, safely hidden. We've come from White Flower Canyon, seeking you and others who remember the old ways. Walking Deer's weathered face revealed complex emotions. White Flower Canyon, he repeated softly. Many years since I walked there. He studied Rose with new intensity. You are not missionary. What are you to my cousin? His wife, she answered simply. In the Apache way. Surprise registered briefly before Walking Deer nodded. The world changes in unexpected paths. He pocketed the cross and stood. Tonight, after dark prayer meeting, North Creek bed. I will come alone. Is it safe? Rose asked. Walking Deer's smile held little humor. Nothing is safe here, but prayer meeting keeps White Eyes busy. Good time for Apache to disappear briefly. As Rose prepared to leave, Walking Deer caught her arm. Tell my cousin, many remember old ways even here. Even now. The hope in those words sustained Rose as she made her farewells to Mrs. Hargrove and departed the mission. She walked unhurriedly through the reservation, maintaining her pious demeanor while observing everything, the conditions, the security, the daily routines that might affect their plans. As she passed one of the government shacks, a small object rolled to her feet, a child's toy fashioned from a corncob wrapped in colored cloth. Rose bent to retrieve it, finding herself face to face with a young Apache girl of perhaps 5 years. Thank you. Lady, the child said in English, accepting the toy. Something in her features struck Rose as familiar, the same proud set of the jaw, the same intelligent eyes as Swift-Hawk. Before she could speak, an Apache woman hurried from the shack, pulling the child back. Sorry. Missionary, the woman apologized, her eyes downcast. Little one, not bother you again. As the woman turned away, Rose glimpsed a silver bracelet partially hidden beneath her sleeve, identical to the one Swift-Hawk now wore. Wait, Rose called softly. Please, what is your name? The woman hesitated, suspicion warring with courtesy. I'm called Rebecca now. Was once Morning Bird, the name Swift-Hawk had mentioned belonging to his cousin's wife. And the child with the familiar features, your husband, Rose whispered. Was he Walking Deer? Fear flashed across the woman's face. Why you ask this? A message, Rose said quickly, from family who searches. North Creek bed, after dark prayer. Understanding dawned in Morning Bird's eyes. Without another word, she gathered her daughter and disappeared into the shack, leaving Rose standing alone with the weight of this unexpected discovery. Twilight descended over the reservation as Rose made her way back to Swift-Hawk's hiding place in the hills. The revelation about Walking Deer's family had shaken her, and she hurried to share the news. Swift-Hawk listened intently as she recounted her discoveries, his stoic expression betraying emotion only when she described the silver bracelet on Morning Bird's wrist and the child with familiar features. Little one, he repeated softly. Walking Deer's daughter. My blood. They've renamed them all, Rose added. Joseph, Rebecca. They're trying to erase who they are. Swift-Hawk's jaw tightened. Names can be taken. Spirit remains. He studied the darkening reservation below. We must be careful tonight. Many eyes watch. As full darkness fell, they made their way cautiously down to the designated meeting place, a dry creek bed north of the main compound, sheltered by cottonwoods and tall brush. Swift-Hawk moved like a shadow, teaching Rose to place her feet silently, to blend with the night. They waited in concealment, tense and alert. An hour passed before a subtle movement caught their attention, 3 figures approaching silently along the creek bed. Swift-Hawk stepped partially from cover, revealing himself to the newcomers, while Rose remained hidden. Ready as they had planned, cousin, came a quiet voice. Walking Deer emerged from the shadows, followed closely by Morning Bird and their daughter. For a moment, the 2 men simply regarded each other, separated by years and experiences, yet bound by blood and memory. Then Swift-Hawk stepped forward, embracing his cousin in the Apache way. Words flowed between them in their native language, too rapid for Rose to follow with her limited understanding. Swift-Hawk beckoned her forward. This is Rose, my wife. Walking Deer nodded respectfully. The missionary who is not a missionary. Brave woman. Morning Bird studied Rose with cautious interest, her arm protective around her daughter. The girl, perhaps 5 years old, watched with solemn eyes that seemed to absorb everything. We must speak quickly, Walking Deer said, glancing toward the reservation. Prayer meeting ends soon. They settled in a tight circle, speaking in hushed tones. Walking Deer removed something from inside his shirt, a folded piece of buckskin containing what appeared to be a crude map drawn with charcoal. "Army plans to move us," he explained, spreading the map on the ground. "Further west. Desert land. Many will die there." Swifthawk studied the map, his expression grim. "When? 1 moon from now. After harvest. You could come with us," Rose suggested. "Tonight," Walking Deer shook his head. "Too many soldiers. They would hunt us." "We escaped before," Morning Bird interjected, speaking for the first time. Her English was less practiced than her husband's. 2 summers ago, with others. "Soldiers caught us. Punishment was—" She trailed off, her hand unconsciously moving to a scar visible on her forearm. Swifthawk's eyes darkened with anger. Walking Deer placed a calming hand on his cousin's shoulder. "We are not without hope," he said. "Many families plan to leave before the move west. Apache scouts know safe paths through mountains." He tapped the map. "Here, hidden canyon with water, large enough for many families. 2 weeks' journey by foot." Rose understood the significance. "You're organizing an escape." Walking Deer's eyes held a mixture of determination and wariness. "We watch, we wait. When time is right, we go. 20 families? Maybe more. We can help," Swifthawk offered immediately. "Not now," Walking Deer cautioned. "Too dangerous. But when time comes, we will need guides who know old ways, who remember paths of our ancestors." He removed something else from within his shirt, a small leather-bound book, its cover worn and faded. Rose recognized it immediately as a Bible. "They think this is my most precious possession," Walking Deer said with subtle irony. He opened the book, revealing that the center had been hollowed out. Inside lay a small leather pouch. "What whites do not understand," he continued, extracting the pouch, "is that Apache can learn new ways while keeping old medicine." He loosened the pouch's drawstring and poured its contents. Into his palm, a handful of corn kernels painted with minute symbols in different colors. "Talking seeds," Swifthawk explained to Rose. "Old way to send messages without words." Walking Deer selected several kernels, arranging them in a specific pattern. "Blue for water sources, red for danger points, white for safe camps." He handed the arrangement to Swifthawk. "This tells when and where we will attempt escape. Be there if you can." Swifthawk studied the pattern intently, committing it to memory before carefully returning the kernels to the pouch. "We will be there," he promised. A distant bell sounded from the direction of the mission. Walking Deer gathered his map and seed pouch quickly. "Prayer meeting ends. We must return." The farewell was brief but emotional. Swifthawk embraced his cousin again, then Morning Bird. When he knelt before Little One, the child regarded him solemnly. "You are Apache," Swifthawk told her in their language. "Never forget." The girl nodded, surprising them all by reaching up to touch Swifthawk's face with small fingers. "I remember stories of Swifthawk," she whispered. "Mother tells when no white ears listen." Morning Bird quickly hushed her daughter, but the moment had struck deep. As the family melted back into the darkness toward the reservation, Rose saw moisture in Swifthawk's eyes, perhaps the first tears she had witnessed from him. They retreated to the hills in silence, each absorbed in thoughts of the encounter. Only when they reached their hidden camp did Swifthawk speak. "We help them," he said, his voice firm with resolve. "All of them." Rose nodded, understanding the commitment they had just made, not just to Walking Deer's family, but to 20 Apache families seeking freedom from a life of confinement. "What about Peterson?" she asked quietly. "The wanted posters?" Swifthawk looked toward the distant reservation, then back to Rose. His hand reached for hers, fingers intertwining. "Some dangers worth facing," he said simply. "For family." In that moment, Rose understood that their journey had evolved yet again, from escape to reunion, and now to rescue. Whatever risks lay ahead, they would face them together. As they settled beside their small concealed fire, Swifthawk removed the talking seeds from his pouch, arranging them in the pattern Walking Deer had shown. Tomorrow, they would begin planning for the most dangerous undertaking yet, helping 20 Apache families escape government control. But tonight, they had found something precious that had seemed lost forever: family.